don't know why Ed gets such a kick out of me putting this windlass back together. I don't know what he sees.
Well, if you've been following our videos, you probably know that our windlass died on our trip to the Abacos. So this video is about us troubleshooting the problem and fixing the windlass. Now you might also be wondering, why am I showing this video now and interrupting our trip? Well, a lot of people have been asking how we solved the windlass issue, but the real reason is I left some of my files on the boat in Florida, and I'm currently at my land house in Pennsylvania, so I can't edit anymore until I get back to Florida and retrieve the files. So this video and possibly the next one might be about boat repairs, and then we'll continue on with our trip through the Abacos. And if you're a Patreon, you probably know that Lynn was hospitalized. So if you stay to the end of this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened to Lynn, how she ended up in the hospital, and how she's doing. So stay tuned. Okay, well, I started working on the windlass issue today. My first thought was, let me check the breaker. Maybe it's a faulty breaker. And I had to take apart the cable master area to kind of fit in there to change the breaker. And when I rebuilt everything a couple of years ago, I cannibalized all the old parts so that I'd have some spares if I needed. And I did have a spare breaker, which is nice. These things are like $175 each, these dumb things. But anyway, I switched the breaker out. It did not work. It was not the breaker. So the next thing I think I'm going to try and do is I think I'm going to remove any possibility of tension against. I'm going to take the capstan off. I'm going to take the Wildcat off, the chain guard, and just make sure there's nothing, just have the shaft there, make sure there's nothing dragging somehow. I don't know, that might be more wishful thinking, but I guess we'll find out. But I'm going to try that first. If that doesn't work, I'm going to take the wires off the motor and then see if it blows the breaker so that I can isolate whether or not it's something in the control box or if it's actually the motor or gearbox. And then if it's not, that doesn't do it, then I'm going to take the motor off itself and see if I can operate the motor without the gearbox. That's the worst case scenario, because that would require me to have to repair a gearbox, and that is a bitch. So we'll take it one step at a time, and hopefully the next thing solves it, or the next thing after that. We'll see.
I feel lucky.
Yeah. Lucky would have been if the breaker did it.
No.
Now I'm going to try it. Let's see if it spins without any of that stuff on it. Okay, so I'm gonna go through the breaker. And that did not work. Next step is take the wires off the motor and seeing if it's blowing a breaker before the motor. Probably not. And then the next step after that is take the motor off and see if it'll turn the motor without any gears on it. Either way, it's a pain in the neck. Okay, well, now that taking the capstan and the Wildcat off and replacing the breaker did not help, I'm going to start taking wires off of this motor. As you can see, there's two heavy-duty red wires going to it. That's for that's the positive, and it's one's forward, one's reverse. And then there's a heavy yellow wire as well. That's the negative. So I'm going to start disconnecting these wires and see if I can get the breaker to stop popping. Well, I disconnected the wires from the motor and I retried the windlass, and kind of like I suspected, it did not blow the breaker, which means the control box is good and the problem is going to be either the motor or it's going to be the gearbox. So I reconnected all the wires and disconnected the motor from the gearbox, and sure enough, it was still blowing the breaker, which logically means that it's something wrong with the motor. Now, I'm actually kind of happy about that because the gearbox is a nightmare to change, and I'd rather change the motor. In fact, I tested the gearbox once I had the motor off, and I can spin the windlass with my finger. It works so well. But here's the motor. I disconnected it and I pulled it apart. I mean, pulled it out of the gearbox and I brought it up here. It's a 32 volt DC motor. I know very little about motors. It's probably something I should educate myself about. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to a professional motor guy and have them check it out and see if they can tell me what's wrong with it. And hopefully it's something I can have repaired inexpensively, because this motor, new from Galley-Made, is about $1,300. So I hope I don't have to spend that much. We'll see what happens. Okay, well, it wasn't particularly good news about the motor for the windlass. We took our old motor apart and, well, they kind of exploded on the inside. There was some burn up wires and I don't know, stuff was messed up in there. So we found out that the parts that I needed to fix the motor were going to be about $800 plus labor doing it. However, we were able to locate a replacement, a reconditioned 32 volt, same exact motor for 750 bucks. So that's what we ended up going with. And I'm going to install it, and this thing better work. Now, what I did was, or what I'm doing, I should say, is I got one of these metal threaded rods here. Since this is a very kind of a heavy motor for me to hold up with one hand and try and feed the screws through to mount it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut little sections of this off and put them into where the motor goes, so that way they'll act as a little guide and they'll hold the motor in place while I put the actual bolts in. So that's the plan. So I'm going to cut another one of these right now. And give it a shot. Okay, let's see if this works. Oh, that was a dumb mistake. I forgot to put this piece back on. but the motor turned. That was the main thing, so I know the motor's working good now. But without this in, it will not spin the gears. Okay, I have to take it off and put it back on again.
So let's talk a little bit about what happened to Lynn. A few days after we returned to Titusville, Lynn started having some stomach pains. And at first, we didn't give it a whole lot of thought. The night before, she had made these jalapeno poppers, and she ate about a dozen of them. So we kind of thought, well, maybe that's what's causing the stomach pains. But it lasted a couple of days, and then we thought, well, we should probably go see a doctor. But then all of a sudden, it started to go away, and she was feeling much, much better. And we thought, it's probably some kind of a virus or something like that. Well, maybe on the 5th or 6th day, the pains came back. And at this point, we thought, well, this is something, it could be something serious. We should go see a doctor. So we went to one of those urgent care places. And they tested her, and there was, her blood came back well. And they really weren't sure. They thought it might have been the diverticulitis. I think that's how you say that. But they weren't entirely positive, and they recommended that we should probably go get a scan done at the hospital and make sure we know what the issue is. So, well, anyway, we decided, well, let's go do that. So we left the urgent care, and we went straight to a hospital down in Viera. I think it was called Health First Hospital. Great hospital, by the way. Anyway, we get there, and they run her through the scans, and the nurse comes back in the room. She goes, I was really surprised to look at your scan. You have a burst appendix. And we're like, what? Burst appendix? And she's like, oh yeah. And we already contacted the surgeon, and he's coming in this evening. We're going to be operating tonight. And Lynn and I were like, whoa. We thought she was going to get a couple of, some antibiotics, and we were going to go back to the boat and go out to dinner or something like that. But it turns out she had a burst appendix. And she kind of got lucky with this because the way it burst, whatever, debris that happens when it bursts, kind of got trapped between her colon and her uterus. So the infection didn't spread in a large area like I guess it usually does. Anyway, I guess that's why she was able to sustain this burst appendix for a few days, where it's usually something that's extremely urgent. And, that's what we were told by, we didn't know a whole lot about it, but that's what we were told by the physicians there at the hospital and the nurses, is that, this is no playing around with this. You're getting operated on tonight. And, so that's what happened. The surgeon came in. I think it was about 10 o'clock at night, and it was just me and her. My kids were back in Philadelphia, 2 of my children, and then my other son, I called him and let him know, and he started heading over to the hospital. And they took Lynn in, it's about 10 o'clock at night, something like that, and I was kind of beside myself when this was going on. I mean, we neither of us have ever had any real health issues. In fact, that neither of us have been hospitalized. I think the last time was when our youngest son was born. But anyway, I know everything went well. The long story short, my son and his girlfriend came to the hospital, and kept me company while I walked around in circles for a couple hours. But doctor came out and said, that's how we knew she got really lucky in the way it burst. He said there was very little problems, very little cleanup, I guess they say. And so they had her in the hospital for about, 3 days. And then she was doing well enough to go home and start eating food again. And that all, so, I mean, that was kind of it. We waited about 3 or 4 more days because we wanted to get back to Philly. She wanted to get back to our house. And we didn't want to do a long trip with her until she got a little bit better, because we were driving. We had the car down, and one of the cars down in Titusville. So we did that. We took her back. To Philadelphia, and oddly enough, 3 or 4 days later, she had really, really bad pain again. And this time it was kind of her stomach and her leg. And first thing we thought was, oh no, it's got to be blood clots, because they warned us about blood clots. And so I took her right to the hospital in the middle of the night again. We're in the hospital. She's getting scanned. Anyway, this time it turned out it wasn't blood clots at all. She has, what do they call that? Pain in the back. Geez, now I got to edit this because I can't think of what it was called. Anyway, pain in the ass. That's what she's got. That's what she is, too. So anyway, she's recovering perfectly fine from the surgery and the burst appendix. But I don't know. It's funny how things work out, because we had cut the trip short because of this the windlass breaking, and we decided we needed to take the boat back to Titusville so I can get it repaired, because we do a lot of anchoring. And when it was one thing when I had help when my friend Jerry was helping me pull it up. But if it's just Lynn and I on the boat, it's just too much for me to pull up by myself, or even with her help. So we ended up coming back from the Bahamas sooner than we had planned. And well, it worked out well, because otherwise she would have had a burst appendix in the Bahamas, and then who knows how all this stuff would have turned out. But anyway, turned out great. All my thanks to the people at Health First in Vieira. What a fantastic hospital! What a fantastic doctor! You know, man, we were so happy with everybody that we had to deal with throughout this whole situation. And Lynn is doing perfectly fine. She's not in this video, but she'll be in the next one. She's up and about and just doing the normal things she's doing. So anyway, you'll probably see one more maybe video of us doing some kind of repairs and some things we were doing on the boat. And then we're going to get right on back to showing you the videos of the rest of our trip through the Bahamas and Florida. So stay tuned.